What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York. We are back at the Gramercy Theater, and today we return with one of the first guests we've ever had on the show. We return with Dallas Toller-Wade of Narcotic Wasteland. Great to be able to talk with you, man.
Definitely a pleasure, sir. How you been?
Been all right, man. I've been all right. It's last time I spoke to you, we didn't even have this camera yet. I was using just this good old Zoom audio device before Zoom as we know it existed. But now we're back, and 5 years later, it's glad to see you guys are still killing it. Thanks for being here, man.
Oh, man, the pleasure's mine.
Yeah, anytime, man, anytime. So we got two new singles out right now that are absolutely kick-ass, and these singles are just truly, truly brutal. Is this maybe a good representation of what the follow-up to Delirium Tremens is going to be like, or is this just kind of like one-off singles, kind of like an experimental thing?
No, they'll definitely be part of the next record. We're going to drop at least 2, maybe 3 more before the album drops, but the album's going to have quite a bit of songs on it. Don't really know exactly with the whole thing with the pandemic and the Twilight Zone episode everybody's been living. There's a lot of extra material. Now. So I've got kind of a map of how the album's going to run, but, it'll be out the first quarter of next year, we're hoping. So.
Hell yeah, man. Definitely. 2023 shaping up to be a good one, too. This will be the third Narcotic Wasteland album. So at this point, are you guys have a sound that you're trying to stick with, or is there maybe still some experimentation in the songwriting process that you like to be involved with?
For the most part, I just kind of go for the gut, you know what I mean? I just write stuff that gives goosebumps or it gives, a lot of emotional content. So that's usually the primary goal. But, yeah, there's always a little bit of experimenting and just stuff that happens on accident that you're like, oh, wow, that's a cool idea, So a little bit of everything, really.
Does it ever start off with a preconceived vision, or is the songwriting process a very a roll of the dice sort of improvisational process?
It's a little bit of everything. Sometimes things just kind of come to you, and then sometimes you just come across something as you're just jamming out, and all of it fits in together somehow, always. I think maybe because it's from the same source a lot of times, so a lot of it kind of gels together pretty nicely. I'd say we're just better at it, this time around. I'm really excited to share the rest of what we've got going on because it is a little bit of a step up from the last 2 releases in a lot of ways. I think it's a little more focused and mature, and we're just getting better at it.
Definitely. And, I've always wondered about your songwriting process because I've always thought that you kind of I wouldn't exactly call you a concept artist like, Steven Wilson or something like that. But I've always thought that with your work with Nile, there was always a theme with that. And even Narcotic Wasteland, there's this sort of misanthropic, almost a pessimistic viewpoint on humanity. Do you think of a subject matter before you, and does the subject matter you think of maybe guide your hand with how you'll make music? Or do you prefer to have music before any lyrics or themes come into play?
It works both ways, actually. Sometimes, I'll already have some lyrical ideas in mind, or I'll have a melody in my head that I'm kind of singing in my head or something like that. And then sometimes it's just oh, wow, check out these riffs, and let's do something with that. So it's a little bit of everything. Every song, and that's why every song is kind of different. It's a different process in how it comes to you, or how you end up figuring it all out and arranging everything. Sometimes, for instance, let's take Coastal Killings, for example. That was a song that was on the debut album, written about a serial killer from South Carolina. I read the book about this serial killer in a few hours, and then I went out to my little studio and wrote the song that night. And that was it. And it's still one of the most fun songs to play live, gets one of the best live responses. It's one of my favorite songs.
Can't go wrong with serial killers. As we've seen, thanks to Netflix, it always seems like it's the perfect subject matter for entertainment, right?
Yeah, and that particular one, it really hit home with me because I understand how Donald Henry Gaskins ended up the way he was. I grew up in Carolina too, and I always saw those elements and was around those kind of elements and how he was raised. Or he actually wasn't raised, he was just growing. And, so I just found a lot of stuff to relate to with that. But and then other songs, they may take a whole year to finish up. Or there's ideas that's been around for a really long time, and they finally find their place somewhere.
Well, you always have these subject matters, whether it will be about serial killers or like Egyptian history or stuff. Is there ever a time where maybe your personal life or your personal experiences also influence your songwriting process, or do you prefer to use music as just a pure escapism?
Actually, especially with a Narcotic, a lot of the stuff is personal experience. And, you know, one of the later singles, or what latest single we put out, Best Times Have Passed, that's very personal to me because it was just something I was kind of feeling like at the time. I don't feel that the best times have passed. It was just the way I felt that day when I was working on that. And, you know, I had this kind of melancholic melody section and all this stuff that was going on. And one of the main riffs has been kind of a recurring theme since the first album. So that's kind of all tied in together. Like the first album, he had Absent Friends. The second album, you had Bleed and Swell, and now you have The Best Times Have Passed. And they all kind of work together musically and lyrically. So it was almost like, you know how Rush had that part 1, 2, and 3 of the song Fear kind of thing? So it wasn't intentional. It just kind of worked out that way. And that particular melodies and themes started showing up in kind of different ways. So they're all really cohesive together.
In order to like get that inspiration, because clearly it comes internally and externally, is almost kind of like do you almost look for the inspiration? Is there like an essence of research that's sort of like involved, as you mentioned, when reading certain books or literature, or like does inspiration or the idea just happen spontaneously?
Again, both. Like sometimes it'll be something that I read. I read a lot of stuff about, you know, the criminal mind and you know, psychology and just basic. I think people need to spend more time thinking about their mental health, and that's one of the things that I've been kind of into lately, and you know, and trying to improve my own mental health as well. So it's like it goes both ways. Sometimes it's something I read, or sometimes it's just something I experienced in my life. You know, something that I feel strongly about.
Yeah. And I'd imagine, too, like, I love talking. This is, like, another subject matter I like to discuss, because when you write from a personal place, or especially something that, for lack of better words, I don't know if this is being overdramatic, but, like, something traumatic or something, you know, a really hard memory. Obviously, the songwriting process is cathartic, but when darkness is your subject matter, does that also maybe make the songwriting process a little bit deteriorating? I've always said that when darkness is the subject matter, sometimes the artist becomes victims of their own product in a way.
Yeah, that's very profound, actually. Yeah, when I was coming up with Best Times, I was sort of mentally in a bad place, and that was the way to help me kind of pull out of it, actually. But I'd imagine there are some cases out there where the song just takes you, and it's just so powerful, it's like kryptonite. And when I was playing the demo for the latest single to some of my friends or whatever, I'd have to leave the room. I couldn't even bear to listen to it. It would make me upset.
Really?
And like that's happened a couple of times. Some of the songs are really personal, and you know, whether it be a friend of mine that passed away, like in Absent Friends, you know, passed away from an overdose suddenly. There was that. There's Bleed and Swell, which was basically about living with alcoholic. You know, and having to deal with that. And even if you love the person, you have to let them go, because you're going to go down with the ship if you don't leave. And that's one of the most difficult things that a person can go through. And but at the same time, I've got the most clarity right now than I probably have in decades, because I myself is what I like. I'm what I like to call stark raving sober right now. And
I think should be the name of the new album.
Maybe one will be one in the future. We got a name for the new album, but I'm not going to quite reveal it just yet.
Please don't, because this will be uploaded by midnight. I don't feel like cropping anything out today. But like what I've noticed is with death metal, it seems to be a pattern. Like, for instance, Fear Factory writes about like artificial intelligence. Obscura writes about like space, time, and the universe. Amon Amarth writes about Vikings. Deicide Satanism. Like, it almost seems like death metal always explores concepts outside of the personal. So to hear you express, you know, certain moments or memories, it seems, I don't want to say it's a breath of fresh air. I love what death metal does, but it is something very different, I would say. It seems like death metal doesn't get very personal, I would say.
Yeah, and, you know, one of the things that we end up talking about in the songs is, like, you know, drug addiction and stuff like that, and, you know, big pharma and all that stuff. And it's, for me, the ideas and concepts behind all that, it is death. So that's what we're talking about. We're playing death metal, and we're talking about actual death. And we're taking these things and we're putting it right in the listener's face, like as close as we can, and even uncomfortable. We want them a little uncomfortable, maybe. Or some people are, some people think this shit's cheesy or whatever, and then some people just, I get messages all the time, man, thank you. You really helped me through a serious time in my life. And that's like the best compliment you could really have, that your music and your lyrical ideas actually helped someone. So
that I've always wondered, talking with artists, and I've told plenty of my favorite artists that too, that does, if you don't mind me asking, is that like pressuring? Because it almost feels like art is not just a form of expression, it's almost a responsibility too.
It can be, but I try not to look at it that way. That can be an unhealthy way to look at it. This is supposed to be fun, at the end of the day. It's entertainment. Yeah. And you have to remember that that's what it is. Yeah. That we're here to entertain people, and that's it. And there is a responsibility to it, but you can't make everyone happy. There's going to be people out there that are resistant to it for whatever reason, and that's fine. They don't have to like it. They can go listen to something else.
Definitely.
I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to, and you can take it or leave it. That's kind of my approach to it, because whether I'm able to do this full time or not, I'm still going to put out music. I'm still going to try and get better at guitar and better at songwriting and all that stuff. I mean, that's kind of the end goal for me, is just to become better at what I do, no matter what.
I think you're succeeding in that goal, definitely.
Thank you.
Everything you've done. If you don't mind me asking, because we talked about, like what the future holds, I kind of wanted to turn back the clock a little bit, because this year marks 20 and 10 years of this year marks 20 years of Darkened Shrines from Nile, and the Gates of Sethu, 10 years of that album. Just going back memory lane, what was the sort of thought process and the memories of making those two albums?
Well, I tell you what, we had done Black Seeds of Vengeance, and we went out and did some tours for that, and then when we started working on Shrines, it was, it was a little more focused, a little more mature, and everything was just kind of aligning. And I remember the demos back and forth between me and Carl, and learning the stuff and listening to it and checking it out, and then going into the actual studio and recording it. And that was a grueling process, because I feel like when Black Seeds and Shrines came out, I think we were getting into some new territory as far as speed. So it was really challenging and fun to try and get this together. And, it got more refined over the years, because, I love those albums. But, they're a little on the sloppy side. They're a little rough around the edges.
It's fucking death metal, man.
It's what it gives us its charm in a way.
Yeah.
My personal favorite out of all of them is Annihilation of the Wicked. I think just all the stars aligned. It's a tight record, but it's not computer tight. It's still a little smudgy sometimes, and I love that.
Annihilation of the Wicked is like as much of a classic as Tomb of the Mutilated or Once Upon a Cross or any sort of classic death metal album. I've always said Annihilation of the Wicked is like, that's always the first Nile album that I would recommend. But the Gates of Sethu, that album, and sorry if I mispronounced that. But
most people call it Sethu, I think.
Sethu.
Yeah, it don't really matter.
But
that shit was a million years ago.
But, I was, being that I'm a late bloomer with a lot of death metal, that was the first Nile record I discovered when I was finishing high school. And I just wanted to know, what the thought process behind that album was.
Well, it was kind of the same. We were putting some demos and stuff together, a lot of conversations with Carl, conversations with George, stuff like that. And putting everything together, that's a little bit different record as far as just the overall tone of it. We went for a little bit cleaner guitar sound, and it had mixed reviews on that, because everybody wanted that big fat wall of guitars, you know what I mean? And we wanted to do something different, Nile doesn't want to make the same album or the same song over and over again. The process was just as kind of the same, we're just trying to put together the best stuff we could.
Now, when it comes to working together with the band, is it better in Narcotic Wasteland if everybody is sort of on the same page, or if everybody is kind of feeling something different that day, or has a different experience that can maybe help bring contrast to the songwriting process?
Yeah, what I try to do, like usually I just flesh out an entire demo, like drums and then eventually vocals and solos and all that stuff on there. And then, once the guys get a hold of it, what I try to do is not have what we call demoitis,
I've heard that term before.
where, you don't want to be too resistant to some of the ideas that are coming at you because you've listened to this demo and it was the same way. You've listened to it hundreds of times, analyzing it. What I think about this? Do I want to change that? Is this really kicking ass, or I just want to go home? So you have to keep that in mind. Like, they have a different maybe things that they want to try, and as long as it's there for the greater good of the song, that's fine. So I usually try to stay a little bit lenient and not just say no. That's not how I wrote that for you. You know what I mean? I try to be more like, let me spin this for a couple of days and forget about what was on the demo and like try to clear my mind from it. That way you give the additional ideas an actual chance to survive instead of just going in there and saying, oh, no, you play it this way and shut the fuck up,
Yeah, definitely.
Nobody wants to be in a band like that. And if you want to be in an actual band with other people, it's only fair that they get some input on what you're doing.
Of course.
And 9 times out of 10, once you get away from the demoitis and maybe even out of the, get your ego out of the way of the shit, 9 times out of 10, the ideas that anybody's bringing to your songs is really good. And it's just it's a different spin. It wasn't something you thought of before. I like it just because I didn't think of it.
Right?
It adds spice and variety to everything, and keeps it less one-dimensional and singular. Sometimes you want that singularity, but sometimes you want all those ideas to kind of, add things to the song.
Definitely. And I have 2 more questions for you. But when it comes to playing live, because I've seen you play live with both bands now, is there a similar energy that you channel into playing live as you do in your songwriting, or do you consider them almost 2 completely separate arts or 2 separate mind frames altogether?
It's definitely yin and yang. Like, I very much love playing live, but I also very much love being in the studio. I think playing live for me is like, we did it. We made it. And now I can actually just enjoy playing the song. I think that's kind of where that's at. And then, once you do like a whole bunch of touring and you're sick of it and you just need a break, you just want to go home and have a beer and play some Call of Duty or whatever and just clear your mind. And then it's time for that recording process or whatever. And it's like, oh, yes, here we are. We finally get to do this and actually make music. So,
well, this is kind of like the brain-picking question I ask about playing live, because, when you are playing live, you are just taking the songs that you wrote and put on the album and just replicating it in a live setting. So is there anything remotely creative about playing live?
yeah, and a lot of that kind of shows up like towards the end of the song. Like, for instance, the latest single, Best Times Have Passed. It ends abruptly on the studio version. Live, we do like a big metal ending where we're just strumming chords and dancing around, and Joe's back there just killing the drum set. A big metal ending, epic, just going nuts, throwing the horns up, all that stuff. So there's a little bit of that going on in some of the songs, and particularly towards the end. Bleed and Swell is actually quite different live because in the studio, it just has the harmony guitar melody thing recurring throughout the song. But live, when I play it, at the very end of the song, me and Brett will do the harmonies together on the other part. But at the end of the song, I go in by myself, and I just add some random improvised blistering solo at the end of the song.
That's awesome to see. And I love it when artists do that, where it's not just the same. It's great to hear somebody play something live, and hear it live and they execute it well. But to have that little extra flavor at the very beginning or the end always just brings so much more meaning and life to the song as well.
Definitely. And sometimes I'll change out the vocal pattern a little bit, or I'll sustain something a little bit longer because I'm feeling it. I'm kind of in the moment, you know what I mean? And when you have a really hateful sounding voice, it can be sort of empowering, and you just go for it. And sometimes you just get something amazing out of there. Or sometimes you'll add an extra vulgarity, if you will, that's not recently in the song.
I
Just
mean,
feeling the moment. Just feeling that power
you need to drop a couple F-bombs here and there.
every now and then.
Yeah,
Every now and then.
definitely.
Narcotic fucking wasteland. I say that a lot. Hopefully, we can do F-bombs on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Fuck monetization, right?
That's right.
Here, and I saved the most difficult question for last, so I hope to hear a lot of F-bombs from this. How do you know when you're finished with a song?
That's a good question. I had someone tell me one time that you actually never finish a song; you just abandon it.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times.
And I disagree with that. I know when I finish a song. Actually, let's take a Nile song for example. I had a song that I was writing the music for called "Permitting the Noble Dead to Descend to the Underworld." I had most of it done. And then I think we left and like went on tour or something, and it just kind of sat there. And then when I came back and I listened to it, I was like, well, I didn't feel like it was quite complete yet. And then I came back and listened to it, and I was like, well, shit, man, the only thing it needs is a chord on the end of the song, and it's done. And it's like, you just feel it, And some people like to try and do like some elaborate ending or whatever, but I like to. It depends on the song. I kind of try to get away from the fade outs.
Yeah.
Last of the Slave Stick had a fade out on the studio, but after we sorted that out live, I was like, well, fuck, I wish we would have just done that.
Yeah, right.
But so I try to not do I don't think Narcotic had a fade out on Absent Friends, and that was it. I don't think we had any more. So I made a little bit more of a effort to really think about the end of the song and make it something cool, make it really abrupt, or make like one of those metal bashy endings like I was talking about, like one of those live things where you're just like going crazy, and then finally he counts you in and everybody hits the last chord together.
Yeah. Well, with the song, it's about the journey, not the ending, right?
It can be, yes.
Yeah. And do you think that like the meanings kind of go back to what we talked about earlier with the different meanings of your songs, that they could evolve over time as you evolve as an artist, or do you prefer if every song is more or less a snapshot of who you are at that particular time?
Again, a little bit of both. The best times have passed is definitely a snapshot, and then there's other times where it's a little more. It breathes a little more. It's not so rigid. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's great to be able to talk with you 5 years later. And
hell yeah, man.
Yeah, right when we first started out. I will not post the link to that previous interview in the description. It's just an audio, and I was terrible back then. So. But I want to thank you so much. Just with these 2 new singles out, and you're playing tonight with Accept, is there just anything else with Narcotic Wasteland that you'd like to plug for shows or new music coming out?
We definitely have a new full video coming out, probably not too long after we end this tour. We have 2 more shows, I think, something like that. It's hard to keep track, but yeah, we have more music on the way, and just thanks to all the awesome response and all the awesome comments we've been receiving on our current singles that we've released, and just thanks so much for the continued support. I mean, I'm kind of blown away at like how fast this thing has blown up this year, and a lot of it was because of playing those shows, getting out there, meeting those people, you know what I mean? And thanks not only to the fans of Narcotic Wasteland, I always say thanks to just the fans of metal. They're the ones that are keeping it alive. They're the ones, while we're even sitting here right now, we wouldn't be sitting here without you, and I really appreciate it. And I know there's several other musicians that feel the same way.
Yep, and I feel the exact same way, because if it wasn't for lovers of metal, I wouldn't be getting the greatest opportunities to talk to some amazingly talented people. So thank you to the metal fans as well out there for helping me get some great opportunities to meet amazingly talented people like yourself as well.
Thank you. Fuck yeah.
Yeah, but it's so great to be able to talk with you, Dallas. Everybody, Dallas, Toller, Wade of Narcotic Wasteland. Be sure to check out their 2 new singles, and be sure to be on the lookout for more new stuff coming in 2023. Heavy New York. We'll see you next time.